Hello, my friends. This is Dr. Deepak Chopra, and it's a great privilege for me to be recording this message for you on the grand occasion of Erwin Laszlo's new paradigm expressions regarding cosmology and a deeper understanding of cosmic consciousness, or what we call fundamental reality. So, of course, I've spent my entire career trying to figure this out. And what I'd like to share with you is some of the ideas that we have shared with the world at the Chopra Foundation, which is a nonprofit 501c3, and also some of my current thinking on the nature of reality. So with that, I'd like to show you the first slide. May I have the first slide, please? This is the first slide, and some of the insights I'm going to share with you also found in my book, Meta-Human, which talks about the next stage of human evolution, but also about meta-reality and metaverses, which are becoming part of our lingo these days, our language. And that's a good sign, because language always precedes insight, and language is part of the evolution of the human species, which creates models of reality. So everything we know in today's science is based on a model of reality, and these models keep changing. What is the reality that is behind the models that we create as humans? So I'd like to move to the next slide, please. You will see that what we call meta reality is based on a very ancient aphorism that comes to us from the Upanishads. And the Upanishads are the expression of sages and scientists. I call them scientists of consciousness, that are considered luminaries in the spiritual tradition of India. So in Sanskrit, this phrase reads, Yatha Pinde Tatha Brahmande. As is the atom, so is the universe. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. As is the human mind, so is the cosmic mind. As is the human body, so is the cosmic body. A kind of a prelude to our current models of the holographic understanding of the universe, the holo movement that we call the universe, that we experience in our own consciousness. So before we go into the deeper nature of existence, the first point I want to make today is that what we call our body-mind and also our experience of the world is the metabolism of experience. There's an ancient aphorism in Ayurveda. If you want to know what your experiences were like in the past, you can look at your body and the world right now, because that's the expression of the metabolism of experience. If you want to know what your body and the world will look like in the future, then you can look at your experiences right now. And so experiences are actually space-time events in awareness or consciousness, and we interpret them as mind, body, and universe. Space-time events, they're a continuum of space-time event. Each space-time event is actually a perceptual snapshot, but the continuity of these perceptual snapshots in the midst of being or awareness gives rise to the movie that we call the changing body-mind universe experience. If I can see the next slide, then you will see that our physical body is a dynamic activity of seeming non-change in the midst of change. Seeming non-change, because if I look at your body right now, it doesn't seem to be changing. If I take a snapshot of your body now on my camera, that's it. And then I take another snapshot immediately after that, it seems the same. But over a course of time, we recognize that in every moment, the body and the world you're experiencing is dynamic activity, looks like non-change in the moment, but it is changing. And this seeming non-change in the midst of change in biology is referred to as homeostasis or self-regulation. So normally we interpret our outer life as perceptions such as sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. But of course, our outer life is also, if somebody is looking at you, at your body mind, they can see that every day you cycle through sleep and waking stage. And of course, the sleep stage also has a dream element to it. In fact, the dream element and deep sleep are about equal in proportion. We also breathe every day, we eat every day, we metabolize every day, we interact with what we call the environment every day, with nature, and ultimately with the totality of the universe that is expressing itself as our immediate experience that we call outer life. Of course, that's just a phrase, outer life. As we'll see, there is no inner and outer as far as awareness is concerned. The inner life, of course, is very private, although we can make some guesses when we look at somebody's facial expressions or their body language. We might be able to guess what's happening in their inner life. We have about 43 facial muscles and that express over 100 emotions. And emotions are thoughts linked to sensations. As a result of this, we experience what we call inner life: thoughts, emotions, memories, desires, imagination, creativity. Some of us, for introspection, is part of our daily practice. And then, of course, we have intuition and higher vision and the desire for transcendence. All this we call our inner life, but actually both inner and outer are modifications of awareness given different labels. This is something very interesting right now, that we are looking at new paradigms through the window of science. These are cover issues of The New Scientist, questioning what is reality, questioning the idea that your entire body is a thought process. You'll see some more interesting covers of the emerging paradigms. Is evolution just random mutations and natural selection, or is evolution guided by consciousness? Is the universe itself conscious? What is the flaw at the heart of reality? Because the current models, cosmological models, including cosmic inflation, including the fine-tuning of what we call the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe for mind and consciousness, the cosmological constant, what we call the standard model of physics, are all revealing themselves to be incomplete, even though they work as far as technology is concerned. Or everything we do today is based on science and technology, and all we can say about science and technology is it works. But it works notwithstanding all the current conundrums, which I just mentioned: cosmic inflation, fine-tuning, what happened in the Planck epoch, what is happening right now at the level of the quantum vacuum, why are there inconsistencies in understanding cosmic inflation, very huge inconsistencies between measured values and which are observed values and theoretical mathematical values. And also the very fundamental question, why is mathematics, which is an activity in consciousness, so unreasonably effective? Something that Eugene Wigner pointed out. To say that we really understand reality from a scientific perspective right now would be actually stretching that statement. We do not understand the scientific basis of even perception. It's called the hard problem of consciousness. And of course, all the models we have, whether it's classical model or Newtonian model or the quantum mechanical model, they all have flaws. Quantum mechanics is an amazing recipe for making calculations and predictions. But if you go Google, check out Wikipedia, and the interpretations of quantum mechanics, you'll find over 30, which shows that we do not actually understand the meaning behind these amazing scientific discoveries, which have radically changed our view or model of what we call the universe. Remember that science has only been around for 500 years. It started about the European Enlightenment, the era of Isaac Newton, but also Descartes and other European philosophers, including later Wittgenstein and some amazing thinkers. But the scientific revolution is only 500 years, and relativity and quantum mechanics are about 100 years. And they've radically changed our experience of what we call the universe. And yet none of those theories actually are complete in that they answer the basic questions we have. If there was a Big Bang, what existed before? What was the cause of the Big Bang? Were there fundamental laws of nature, as we call them, in the Planck epoch? Why was cosmic inflation, where the universe tripled in size every trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second, from almost nothing to the size of a grapefruit, and then again slowed down? So now we have a universe where the cosmic horizon is 47 billion light years away from us, and galaxies are tumbling across it. And even space-time is expanding and becoming vaster, a result of dark energy, the anti-gravity force that we have no idea what it is. So let's see the next slide. Given what I've showed you right now, I want to digress a little bit in that if you understand what we call inner and outer life and what we call metabolism of experience, then we can understand how to use experience to self-regulate our bodies, our changing bodies. And if we can self-regulate our changing bodies and integrate body, mind, and spirit as one unified process in consciousness, then we can hope to actually harvest these insights for a life which is healthy, and longevity and health span can come together, so that we can aspire, as the ancient sages of the Upanishads did, to a healthy life beyond 100 years and in good health, and death as a choice in meditation, what is called Mahasamadhi. So these are very important pillars of well-being: sleep, with deep sleep particularly, and dream state for the detoxification of the physical body and the emotional body, meditation and stress management for integration of mind, body, spirit, and self-regulation, movement, yoga, mind-body coordination through yoga, pranayama, breathing exercises that we can use to activate our vagus nerve and vagal tone, so we can counteract the effects of sympathetic overdrive, which is the pandemic of our civilization. Healthy emotions such as empathy, compassion, love, joy, equanimity, and transcendence of emotions ultimately. Nutrition, basically we are beginning to understand now that a diet that has maximum diversity of plant-based foods, that is farm to table, can change 99.9% of the genetic information in our body, and ultimately change the entire software of the body, because only 1% of genetic information is human, or less than 1%, and that too can be upgraded. We have a lot of research showing that epigenetic modulations can actually activate genes for self-regulation and homeostasis, deactivate genes for inflammation, accelerated aging, and chronic illness. Only 5% of disease-related gene mutations are fully penetrant, in that they guarantee disease. The remaining are modifiable through lifestyle. So if we can change the software of the body 99.9%, then we can, of course, change the printout, which is the evolving, changing body-mind system. huge promise, but actually the equations of quantum mechanics right now suggest that the arrow of time is bidirectional. And this is something I'm experimenting with right now at the Chopra Foundation. It's called the Longevity Project, which combines modern insights from quantum mechanics, quantum metabolism, quantum biology, but also lifestyle measures and genetics and epigenetics into actually looking at lengthy health spans. If you're interested in that, you can also send an email to longevity@choprafoundation.org and become a participant in the longevity experiment. The sixth item here is biological rhythms. And as you know, we have 4 rhythms at least that govern our biology. Circadian rhythm, as the earth spins on its own axis. Seasonal rhythm, as the earth goes around the sun. Gravitational rhythms, as a result of the varying movements of the earth, sun, and moon in relationship to each other, but ultimately a result of the activity of the total universe. So we have circadian rhythms, seasonal rhythms, gravitational rhythms, lunar rhythms, and our body is part of those rhythms, those cosmic rhythms. And even though we call the universe, which means one song, we don't actually live our lives in harmony with that one song. Our body does its best through tuning into those rhythms. We can't hear the tune of that one song, but our body certainly is dancing to it all the time. Now, these are very important 7 pillars of well-being, but in the absence of the 7th, which is understanding ourself, our true self, not our ego identity, not our body-mind, but the true self, in which the body-mind is a changing process, we can actually go beyond the fear of death and understand that in transcendence, we have a different identity, which is beyond space and time. And in transcendence, we have the spontaneous emergence of Platonic values such as truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, love, compassion, joy, equanimity, and also the absence of the fear of death. This is the essential spiritual experience, or even religious experience, before it is codified into dogma or theology or religious institutions. So with that, let's go a little deeper into the nature of reality. Is reality physical or non-physical? This argument has been going on in the West since Aristotle and Plato. As you know, Plato was an idealist. The world is an expression of ideas in the mind, and his student Aristotle was a physicalist. So we can say Plato was amongst the first philosophers, including in the West, Pythagoras and Parmenides and Hermes Megistus and many others. And of course, he idealized Socrates as the ultimate teacher. Whether Socrates was a real person or not, we don't know. Aristotle had a student called Alexander the Great who came all the way from Macedonia to India. And actually, there was a convergence between Greek and Indian philosophy at that time. And Alexander the Great, who died at a very young age and went back to Greece with a lot of scholarly introduction to ancient Vedic thought as well. During the European Enlightenment, René Descartes popularized the philosophy of dualism, which means that mind and body are 2 separate entities. This philosophy is not tenable anymore. It violates scientifically all the laws of thermodynamics, and we can't go into this right now, but dualism doesn't make any sense. If mind and body are different, then how do they interact with each other? What is the agent that communicates mind to body? And why can I lift my arm up or do anything like speak or move? The reason is that my body and mind are probably ultimately made of the same substance, which is a non-substance. So this brings us to a very major issue in science, and that is called naive realism. So naive realism is also called scientific realism, which is based on certain premises. The first premise of naive realism is that the physical world is exactly what it looks like to the five human senses: sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. That the physical world is actually exactly what is perceived by the five human senses. There are many problems with that. The five human senses sense a very narrow band of activity that we call the universe, less than 0.1%. Every sense is misleading. My senses tell me the earth is flat. Nobody believes that anymore. My senses tell me that the ground I'm standing on is stationary. It's spinning at dizzying speeds and hurtling through space at thousands of miles an hour. And my senses tell me that you're a three-dimensional object moving in space-time, which is also made of objects. And we know that everything solid is proportionately as void as intergalactic space. If you could see me as I really am, you'd see a huge emptiness with a few scattered dots and spots and random electrical discharges. And even those random electrical discharges are modified forms of emptiness, whatever that is. So naive realism seems very misleading when it comes to understanding reality. Naive realism also assumes subject-object split, which is artificial. And naive realism assumes an embodied observer, but no observer can be found in the body because the body itself is an observation like everything else. Naive realism, while it's good as scientific inquiry, is based on what I think are false premises. There is no physical world. To speak of. The physical world is a human interpretation for a species-specific mode of experiences through narrow bands of perceptual activity. This is an argument that the great sage seer Rabindranath Tagore, also a Bengali poet, had with Einstein in 1930, where Einstein actually made a compromise to Tagore when he said, science is my religion. Religion because I have faith in the scientific method. And that's good enough for doing experiments, but is definitely not good enough for understanding reality. In fact, there is no science of consciousness, because science itself is an activity in consciousness. It was created in consciousness, and particularly in human consciousness. So if reality is non-physical, then what is it made of? And this is what we call a non-material monism. This is the non-dual philosophies that have ancient traditions in Vedanta and Kashmir Shaivism, in many non-dual traditions, including some aspects of Buddhism as well, and also the Gnostic Gospels in the West. Does it matter if we know reality? And I'm using matter as a verb here, not as a noun. And if it matters, then what is mattering as what we call our experience of the universe? Are we creating our own reality? And if so, how? Look at this picture right now, and I ask you, can you see a Mexican on a horse with a person sleeping on the sidewalk? Or can you see an old man with a beard? And the answer is, what you actually experience visually is a bunch of colors. That's it. Colors, shapes, and forms are interchangeable. In the absence of color, there's no shape or form. That's what's happening in consciousness. If a baby was looking at this, all it would experience is colors. But then human constructs come in. We call a certain combination of colors right now a Mexican on a horse. But the same combination of colors we can also call an old man with a beard. And the difference is we give meaning or constructs to our experience of color. And that's how we create our visual reality that we call the objective world, or even the objective body, because there's no such thing. It's a combination of colors. That's it, visually. And the same principle holds true for all the other senses. It's a combination of sensory experiences: sound, touch, sight, taste, smell, texture. That's all we experience. Raw experience directly is perceptual modification of consciousness appearing as that, appearing as this, appearing as the world. Now look at the next slide, and the same principle holds true. Okay, all these are basically to show you that what you experience is colors. That's it, visually. But then you transpose meaning to colors, and in this case, you can see a woman with beautiful locks, or you can see two horses against a background of sun and sky. The meaning you give shapes your perception. And of course, those perceptions shape emotions and everything else that we call reality. Everyday reality is human meaning imposed on sensations, period. These sensations could be sense perceptions, but also faint images in consciousness, or emotions, or feelings, or thoughts. Sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts are the raw experience of everyday reality. And then, of course, they're interpreted as mind, body, and universe. That's how we create our reality, both personal and collective. If you look at the four dots in the center of this picture and you stare at them for a while, and then you look at the white background outside the darkness here, you might see Jesus Christ or Moses, or the whole point here is that everything that we see as outer reality is a projection of our own consciousness, and that includes our own physical body. Here, if you look at the dots in the center of the nose, stare at them for a while, and then if you can, actually look at the space outside or at the ceiling, you might see what you might call the real girl. In fact, these are all perceptual hallucinations. And everything that you see, touch, taste, smell, think about, visualize, imagine, conceptualize, is actually not there. It is a modification of consciousness appearing as that, and that too, the snapshot is very short in duration. It's almost instantly over as soon as it's born. So every experience as a snapshot is an ephemeral, transient, evanescent, ungraspable snapshot, sensation. But it gives continuity because in between the snapshots is the presence of awareness, which creates a storyline and a meaning, and ultimately creates what we call the experience of body, mind, and the world. It's an interesting picture I wanted to show you because the face you see over there actually doesn't exist in the picture, but the animals you see, and the birds you see, and the leopard you see, and the tree you see, and the mountain you see is also not there in the picture. All there is a combination of colors, which are modifications of your own awareness as that. And that holds true for all senses. Let's see the next slide and see where we are going. All experience is constructed in consciousness or awareness. And today we use models like quantum entanglement, which means at the most fundamental level, particles and waves are entangled, are actually all one before they manifest or differentiate into what we call differences or the diversity of experience. At the same time, qualia are entangled at the most fundamental level. Qualia are qualities of experience like color, fragrance, odor. Then we impose meaning to that. This is the smell of garlic, and now it becomes the smell of garlic. But that's a construct. As is garlic, a construct. These qualia entanglements and quantum entanglements are a result of what we call meaning entanglement, which all results in the metabolism of experience, which gives us the experience of what we call everyday reality. So the construction of everyday reality is basically perceptual experience that is conceived, constructed, governed, and comes into existence in what we call fundamental reality or consciousness. And in the same way we construct visual experience, we construct auditory experience, tactile experience, taste and smell experience. And the confederation of these perceptual activities, that narrow band of human perception, creates the construct of the physical world, including the physical body. If you have stayed with me this far, then matter and the physical world are convenient fictions. You and I, as body minds, are fictional characters in a collective dreamscape that we have together fashioned. So the Yoga Vasishtha in one verse says, together we have created each other and the universe in our fancy. Wittgenstein, the great Western philosopher, said, we are asleep, our life is a dream, but once in a while we wake up enough to know that we are dreaming. And of course, the Buddha said, this lifetime of ours is transient as autumn clouds. To watch the birth and death of beings is like looking at the movements of a dance. A lifetime is like a flash of lightning in the sky, rushing by like a torrent down a steep mountain. But the Buddha also means waking up from this dream into fundamental reality, where we recognize that perceptual activity is species and culture specific with overlapping cross-species bandwidths of experience, leaky margins in the leaky fictional characters and the leaky world that we construct. My goal right now is not only to evolve from human to metahuman, which means waking up from the conditioned mind, all the cultural, religious, scientific, mythical conditioning that has been going on since the beginning of the cognitive revolution, when humans started to create narratives around fundamental experiences of sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts. So in order to wake up, there are certain steps that we need. Non-reactivity to override the midbrain conditioned responsive, which have now become instinctive, and also the emotional responses that are instinctive. And I've used this as a formula, STOP, as an acronym, STOP. S stands for stop, T, take 3 deep breaths and smile, O, observe your breath or any sensations in the body, and then proceed with awareness and loving kindness. And this opens the window to divine attitudes like gratitude, loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity. It leads to non-judgmental awareness of external and internal world, which are, as I just said, mind-forged manacles or constructs. It leads to introception, which is the ability to know what's happening in the eternal world of not only mind space, but visceral space, organs and tissues and activities inside our body, ultimately to transcendence and metacognition, where we can observe ourselves having a sensory experience, but also observe ourselves in intentional perceptual experiences and self-observation, which activates our prefrontal cortex, which according to science is the latest product of biological evolution. Of course, I go beyond that, in that prefrontal cortex and brain are, again, mental constructs. They don't actually exist as such, but they're convenient labels to identify what we call neural correlates of experience. But even as we do that, we wake up to fundamental reality. So if you look at some of the ancient wisdom traditions, particularly Vedanta, you'll see that reality is described as different in different states of consciousness. So right now, I presume we are all in the waking state, which is a lucid dream in a vivid now, because it'll be over. As soon as this lecture is over, what we're discussing will be done. It might live on the internet, but that's a different story. The waking state is a lucid dream in a vivid now. If I asked you what happened to your childhood, it's a dream. What happened to your teenage years, it's a dream. What happened to yesterday, it's a dream. What happened this morning, it's a dream. What happens to these words by the time you experience them? They don't exist. So the whole waking state is also a dream. But then there's another dream state we experience at night, which is much vaguer, more ambiguous. And when that settles down, we go into deep sleep. Now, I'm learning from evolutionary biologists that life began, at least the experience of life began, in biological organisms through deep sleep, which then manifested as dreams and then as the waking state. So deep sleep might be our window to what we call soul consciousness. And soul consciousness is what we experience. It's called the fourth state of consciousness in ancient traditions, Turiya, which is transcendence, where we experience ourselves as the witnessing awareness of the other states. And if we abide in that soul consciousness, the experience of the non-changing factor in every changing experience, and if we abide in that, that leads to cosmic consciousness, and that we start to wake up in waking, dreaming, and sleeping. And that ultimately leads to divine consciousness. We experience that same witnessing awareness in every object of experience, and ultimately that merges into unity consciousness, or the knowing that we, as pure consciousness, are differentiating into all modes of knowing, but also all so-called knowers and all things known. And this is called the togetherness of observer, observation, and observed. Knower, knowing, and known. Seer, seeing, and scenery. Unity consciousness is also then called liberation or freedom from the conditioned mind. And in that state, we are free to recycle and evolve into other states of consciousness, ultimately experiencing ourselves as free and fundamental and prior to all experience, but also present in the midst of all experience. Meta-reality then is that field of pure consciousness prior to all conditioning, a field of infinite possibilities, a field that is formless, without cause, irreducible, infinite and fundamental, and unpredictable, because it is that unpredictability that leads to infinite creativity. If everything is predictable, it's an algorithm and it's not creative. And that's what we are becoming right now, biological algorithms in the absence of introspection and transcendence and self-awareness. This awareness unfolds through synchronicity, a non-local correlation. It's the source of attention and intention, and it's intrinsically free of its modifications, which means that the awareness of an experience is not the experience. In fact, the experience is a modified form of the awareness itself. This awareness is self-organizing, self-regulating, self-evolving, and rooted in the knowing of what we call I am. And it's not necessarily just Eastern insight or Eastern revelation. In the New Testament, Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am. And when Moses asked the burning bush the nature of God, the answer received is, I am that I am. In the Vedic tradition, there's an expression, aham brahmasmi, I am the universe, before I am Deepak or the experience of an iPhone or a computer or whatever else we have constructed as reality. Is there any evidence that what I'm saying could be true? And right now, there are people in the world of science that are looking at the milestones of waking up, including ourselves at the Chopra Foundation. There's a shift in sense of self, from me to we to us to universal, a change in emotions from fear, anxiety, hostility, and separation to love, compassion, joy, equanimity, a shift in cognition in that we don't see the world as outside us, we see the world as recycling inside us. You know, there's a phrase in the Bhagavad Gita, prakratim swamvashtavai vishrajami puna puna, curving back within myself, I create again and again. I create the experience of mind, body, and universe. I recycle, but I also evolve to higher levels of awareness. So shift in cognition, shift in perception, and that it becomes very clear and lucid, but then we go beyond the perception of the material world to see that it is made of pixels, and then actually the pixels are just consciousness recycling itself. This also causes a shift in memory, and the Vedic expression is, I use memory. I do not allow memories to use me. Allowing memories to use me is called karma, and it's a prison. Using memories is creativity. And that's the goal of existence, to liberate ourselves from karmic bondage. And that leads to insight, intuition, higher vision, creativity, flow, ecstasy, transcendence, and a loss of personal agency from me to we to us to infinity. So I propose to you a new formula, replacing the formula of scientific realism, which is E is equal to mc squared. This would be the formula for creation. 0 is equal to infinity is equal to 1. And finally, knowing that true self leads to the loss of the fear of death, because death and birth are mental constructs, and life is the continuum of both. And birth and death are happening at flashing speeds right now. It's the birth of what we call virtual photons and the death of virtual photons, as determined by the uncertainty principle, which is the creative principle of consciousness. At every moment, birth and death at the speed of light, interpreted in various ways. Birth at the moment of physical birth, or birth at the moment of a fertilized egg, or death at the moment of the absence of the physical body, when in fact anything that's physical is actually a projection of the fundamental, infinite, formless, irreducible, without cause awareness that we really are. So current scientific methodologies are based on the understanding that matter is the ontological primitive of the universe. They're also based on subject-object split and empirical facts as indicative of fundamental reality. But what I'm saying is even empirical facts are species-specific snapshots of experiences interpreted as in human consciousness as facts. There's nothing really factual about them. So at our foundation, we are now looking at new algorithms that include what is called Gödel's theorem, which allows us to go beyond the rationality of even mathematics. Gödel's theorem says that there are theorems in mathematics that can't be proved but are true. So using that and creating new algorithms, correlating brain entrainment with precision genomics, mental health, pain management, bioregulation, stress management, will all, I hope, lead to a new paradigm for well-being at every level of existence, not just physical, emotional, spiritual, but where the spiritual, emotional, spiritual are seen as a unified process in our own being. And when we find that in our own self, that's a journey without distance. That is how the new paradigm will emerge, from self to self. This, I think, could be my final slide. As you know, I've been a practitioner of yoga for as long as I can remember in my adult life. And yoga includes all these things: asanas, which are seats of awareness, breathing practices, meditation, inquiry, dhyan, which is also mode of continuous meditation, dharana, focused awareness, samadhi, which is transcendence. And as we begin to explore the relationship of all these to each other, the ultimate goal is to experience our own lightness of being as fundamental, lighter than the wind, lighter than even space, unimaginable, inconceivable, but that without which there is no imagination, conception, or perception. That is what I wanted to share with you today. And I feel very encouraged that humanity is slowly waking up. If we reach a critical mass of that waking up, then perhaps we can upgrade our collective illusion to a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful planet. Ultimately, the universe will evolve and continue to evolve into degrees of imagination that we currently may be incapable of even imagining. I'll end with a short quote from my favorite poet, Rumi. When I die, I will soar with angels, but when I die to the angels, what I shall become, you cannot imagine. So we are right now, we and the universe are the imagination of ourselves. And imagination is the highest attribute of consciousness as it conceives, constructs, governs, and embeds itself into what it has imagined as the universe. Thank you very much.
Deepak, thank you. You took us on a wonderful and a very insightful journey. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Give my fondest regards to Erwin. Tell him I'm a big fan. Sorry I missed him, but we'll be in touch.
Great. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.